talking about pharmacology of hormones and related drugs, and in that I'll be discussing mainly regarding the thyroid hormones and related drugs. So basically in this video I'll be discussing about the drugs which are used in the treatment of hypothyroidism as well as for hyperthyroidism. Okay, so before starting the main pharmacology, you should be clear regarding few hormones. Like we have got thyrotropin releasing hormone. Next we have got thyroid stimulating hormone, and lastly your thyroid hormone, that is T3 and T4. Okay, so you should have a clear difference between these three hormones. All these three hormones are directly or indirectly involved in the synthesis of T3 and T4. Okay, so these T3 and T4 are your main thyroid hormone, but for release of this T3 and T4 we require TSH as well as TRH. Okay, so we have got hypothalamus. Suppose this is your hypothalamus, and below the hypothalamus there will be hanging anterior and posterior pituitary. Suppose this is your anterior pituitary and this one is your posterior pituitary. So whenever in the blood the level of T3 and T4 is less, this causes the hypothalamus to release thyrotropin releasing hormone. Next, this thyrotropin releasing hormone will be activating the anterior pituitary, and it is moving to the anterior pituitary via the hypophyseal portal vein. And in the anterior pituitary, this TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone, will be causing this anterior pituitary to synthesize and another hormone, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, next this thyroid stimulating hormone will be moving to your thyroid gland. Okay, or more specifically to your thyroid follicle. See, follicles are present in your thyroid gland. So suppose this is your thyroid follicles. Suppose these are your thyroid follicles, and this thyroid stimulating hormone, which is synthesized and released from the anterior pituitary, will be going to your thyroid follicle, and basically from the thyroid follicle your T3 and T4 are being synthesized and released into your blood. Okay, now once in the blood the level of T3 and T4 becomes normal, it becomes optimum, via negative feedback mechanism it will cause inhibition of the release of thyrotropin releasing hormone as well as the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so it is a kind of negative feedback mechanism. Whenever the level of T3 and T4 in the blood is reduced, it will cause release of TRH from the hypothalamus and TSH from the anterior pituitary, and this TSH will cause this thyroid follicle to release T3 and T4 into the blood. Once in the blood the level of T3 and T4 is being normalized or optimized, via negative feedback mechanism it will inhibit the release of TRH and TSH, or you can say further release of TRH and TSH. So this is the normal physiology. Okay, next we'll see somewhat about the thyroid gland. So this thyroid gland is a very small gland which is situated just inferior to your larynx, and when you see the shape, it mainly contains two lateral lobes, a right lateral lobe and a left lateral lobe, which is being connected by a structure known as isthmus. So this part is isthmus. Suppose this is the right lateral lobe and this one is the left lateral lobe. Okay, and when you see the microscopic structure of these thyroid gland, so microscopically, basically it contains some spherical sacs known as the thyroid follicles, which I have drawn over here. Okay, so these are thyroid follicles. These basically contains follicular cells. Suppose these are the follicular cells. Okay, these are follicular cells. FC I'm writing follicular cells, and at the center the structure is known as colline. Okay, So basically this thyroid follicle is the cell where T3 and T4 is synthesized. Okay. And one important feature of these follicular cells are when they are not stimulated, means when they are not under the influence of this thyroid stimulating hormone. In that condition, the structure of these follicular cells will be somewhat like low cuboidal to squamous. Okay, when inactive. Okay, somewhat like this you can see. Okay, when they are inactive. And when they are active means when these follicular cells are under the influence of thyroid stimulating hormone, at that time they become cuboidal to low columnar. Okay, somewhat like this. So this is the basic, you can say, special features of this follicular cells. Okay, follicular cells are the cells which are present in the thyroid follicle. This is the entire thyroid follicle, and these are the follicular cells. When these follicular cells are inactive, at that time they look like low cuboidal to squamous kind of cell. And when they are active, means when they are under the influence of thyroid stimulating hormone, at that time they appear like cuboidal to low columnar like shape, and at the center there will be colloid. So basically in the colloid your T3 and T4 hormone will be present. And apart from this follicular cells, we have got few parafollicular cells as well present in your thyroid gland, and these parafollicular cells will be synthesizing and releasing another hormone, that is calcitonin. So basically you can expect three hormones synthesizing and releasing from your thyroid gland. The first two are T3 and T4, and the third one is the calcitonin. But since we are discussing about the thyroid hormone, and thyroid hormone basically we'll discuss about T3 and T4. Okay, calcitonin is also a kind of thyroid hormone because it is synthesized from the thyroid gland, but but this is basically concerned with calcium balance or calcium management. So today our discussion will be related to just T3 and T4 hormones. Now we'll see some differences between T3 and T4. Like I'm saying thyroid hormones are of two types, T3 and T4. We'll see some differences between T3 and T4. Because this is T3, this one is T4. We'll have some differences. T3, as it is 3, that means it contains 3 iodine atoms. 3 iodine atoms. Okay, and what you can expect with T4? Yes, it contains 4 iodine atoms. Okay, T3 is nothing but 3 5 3 prime triiodothyronine. Whereas T4 is 3 5 3 prime 5 prime tetraiodothyronine. And T4, it is also known as thyroxine. Okay, so if you say T4, if you say thyroxine, or you say 3 5 3 prime 4 prime tetraiodothyronine, all means one and the same. Whereas you say T3, or chemically it is 3 5 3 prime triiodothyronine. Okay, so this is the chemical structure of your T3 and T4. Next, it is said that, as you can see, we have got just one area where you can see prime, but in T4, in two areas, in two places you can see prime. It is said that when the number of prime is more, the compound is less active. Okay, so here in T3 you can see only one prime, in T4 you can see two primes. So more the prime, less is active. Okay, so T4 is less active, and T3, it is more active. And why I am saying this is because again you will come across a compound which is known as reverse T3. In reverse T3, the structure is like 3 5 prime 3 prime and triiodothyronine. So here you can see two areas where prime is there. This is a structure of reverse T3. Okay, reverse T3 means here in two areas you will see prime, and it is very, or you can say very less active. Okay, so 3 5 prime 3 prime triiodothyronine. This is the structure of reverse T3, where you can see two areas where prime is there. Okay, so T3 is active but reverse T3 is less active. Okay, because in normal T3 we have got only one area where prime is there, but in reverse T3 in two areas we can see prime. Similarly in T4 also in two areas we can see prime. So more the number of prime, less is the activity. Okay, so T3 is more active, T4 is less active. This is normally not actually produced, so we will not discuss about reverse T3. We will restrict our discussion with T3 and T4 only. So T3 is more active, T4 is less active. Next, T3 have got short half-life. Short half-life, which is about 1 to 3 days you can say. But T4 have got long half-life, which is for about 5 to 6 days. Okay, and obviously in case of hypothyroidism the half-life will be reduced, and in case of hyperthyroidism the half-life will be increased. Okay, now when physiologically these hormones are being synthesized, normally T3 is synthesized in less amount, it is less synthesized, and large amount of T4 is synthesized, so it is more synthesized. Okay, so physiologically T4 is more synthesized as compared to T3. So this is the basic difference between T3 and T4. Okay, so T3 have got 3 iodine atoms, and it is more active and it has got short half-life, and physiologically less amount of T3 is being synthesized, whereas in case of T4 they contain 4 iodine atoms, they are less active, they have got longer half-life, and physiologically large amount of T4 is being synthesized. Now in thyroid there are basically two kinds of problem that you people can encounter. The first problem is hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism, and second one is hyperthyroidism. Okay, so as you can see, hypo means something is less, hyper means something is more, and what is less, more or less, that is your thyroid hormone. When in the blood the level of T3 and T4 is less, it is known as hypothyroidism, and quite opposite, when in the blood the level of T3 and T4 is more, it is known as hyperthyroidism. So we'll start our discussion with hypothyroidism. Now whenever there is reduced level of thyroid hormone in the blood, we'll attempt to increase it. Okay, now the drug which is used for increasing it is, like we have got two options for hypothyroidism. Okay, for hypothyroidism, either we can give T3 or we can give T4, but for hypothyroidism we'll prefer increasing T4. You know why? Because T4 are long acting. Okay, so the drug that contains T4 is L-thyroxine. Okay, thyroxine. So L-thyroxine is the drug which is used for the treatment of hypothyroidism, and L-thyroxine, what it contains means it contains T4 hormones. And why we are preferring T4 hormone means because these are long acting. But there are certain conditions where there is some kind of emergency hypothyroidism. Okay, in emergency hypothyroidism, see, in emergency condition we know T4 are less active as compared to T3, or you can say T4 are negligibly active. So in emergency condition we require T3, and this emergency condition of hypothyroidism, it is known as mixed edema coma. Mixed edema coma means there will be some kind of emergency condition where there is very severe hypothyroidism, and in this condition this T4 supplement will not work and we require T3. So the drug that contains T3 is leothyronine. Leothyronine. Okay. So leothyronine basically it contains T3, and T3 is mainly very much active. So we require T3 when there is some kind of emergency condition like mixed edema. Okay, so for the treatment of hypothyroidism we'll have L-thyroxine. Okay, L-thyroxine is used in all the condition of hypothyroidism, whereas leothyronine is indicated only and only in mixed edema. Okay, so this is regarding hypothyroidism. Next we'll move to hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism means here the level of T3 and T4 in the blood will be increased. Okay. So in this case we need to reduce the level of thyroid hormone. So to know the exact mechanism of action of the drugs which will be used for the treatment of hypothyroidism, first of all we should know the synthesis, the procedure of how this T3 and T4 are being synthesized, and then we can suggest that at what area we can reduce and means in what area we can use the drug to inhibit the hyperthyroidism. Okay, so first of all we'll check out the synthesis of your thyroid hormone. Okay, so as you know this is your thyroid follicles with all your follicular cells. Okay, and these are your follicular cells. This at the center will be colloid, and surrounding there will be some blood vessels. So I'll zoom up one of your follicular cells and we'll check out very fast that how these thyroid hormones are being synthesized. Okay, so suppose this is your follicular cells. And suppose this is your blood vessel. Okay, so now in the blood all the electrolytes, all the nutrients will be flowing. Along with that you have got iodide also. So here there will be a transporter sitting on the follicular cells, and the name of that transporter is sodium iodide symporter. Means along with sodium, iodide molecule will also be moving inside. Okay, so via this transporter the iodide molecule will be moved inside the follicular cells. Okay, and these follicular cells will be having few other structures also, like here you will find endoplasmic reticulum, and this endoplasmic reticulum will be synthesizing a protein known as thyroglobulin. Okay, and via the Golgi apparatus, these thyroglobulins are packed into a vesicles, and via exocytosis these vesicles will be moving into your colloid. Okay, here over here into your colloid, and these thyroglobulin, this protein contains an amino acid also that is known as thyroxine. Okay, T I am writing for thyroxine. Okay, now as you have seen over here, iodide molecule is moved inside these follicular cells. After moving inside the follicular cells, few reactions of these iodine molecules take place. Okay, that first reaction is, see, this iodide molecule need to combine with thyroxine, but since it is negatively charged it cannot interact with the your thyroxine molecule. So first of all, it has to reduce its negativity. So for reducing its negativity, it will undergo a first reaction that is known as oxidation reaction. So what exactly happens in this oxidation reaction is two molecules of iodide will combine to form an iodine molecule. Okay, so this is the first reaction. After undergoing oxidation, it can easily cross this membrane and move inside in this colloid. Okay, after moving inside this colloid, it will start interacting with this thyroxine molecule. Okay, so it is said that when to a thyroxine one molecule of iodine is combining, it will become monoiodothyroxine. Okay, and moreover, this iodine is an inorganic compound. Okay, and when this inorganic compound is combining with an amino acid, it will become organic. Okay, so iodine when combines with thyroxine, it will become organic compound. So the second step is organification. So in organification step, what happens? Iodine molecule will start combining with thyroxine. When to thyroxine one molecule of iodine is combined, it is known as monoiodothyroxine, or you can say T1. And to a thyroxine molecule, two atoms of iodine is combining, we call it as diiodothyroxine, or you can say simply T2. So T1 and T2 is been formed. Okay, so this is the second step. And third step is coupling. What happens in coupling means when one monoiodothyroxine combines with one molecule of diiodothyroxine, it will form triiodothyronine, that is your T3. Similarly, when one molecule of diiodothyroxine combines with another molecule of diiodothyroxine, it will lead to the synthesis of tetraiodothyronine, that is your T4. Okay, so in coupling reaction, basically your T3 and T4, your hormones is being synthesized. So these are the three important steps taking place in the journey of this iodine molecule. Okay, so iodide molecule is being captured from your blood vessels into the follicle, into your follicular cells via a transporter known as sodium iodide sympater. After moving inside these follicles, it undergoes three reactions. First reaction is oxidation, where iodide molecule is converted into iodine. Second step is organification. Organification means iodine will be inorganic in nature, and when it combines with amino acid, it becomes organic. Okay, inorganic is converted into organic, so we call it as organification. And the last step is coupling. Okay, in organification we got monoiodothyroxine and diiodothyroxine, and in coupling one molecule of this monoiodothyroxine combines with one molecule of diiodothyroxine will get T3, and when two molecules of diiodothyroxine combines together we will get T4. So in coupling reaction we will get the synthesis of T3 and T4. Now the important thing is all these three reactions are being carried out by a single enzyme. The name of that enzyme is thyroid peroxidase. Thyroid peroxidase. Okay, now after the synthesis of this T3 and T4, so now we have synthesized our T3 and T4, and these T3 and T4 are synthesized basically in the colloid. Okay, T3 and T4. This thyroid hormone will be stored in this colloid for a long period of time unless and until TSH will approach to this thyroid follicular cells. When TSH approaches it, it will cause release of this T3 and T4 into your blood circulation. Okay, so this is how the synthesis of thyroid hormone occurs, and the release as well. Okay, release mainly depends upon the thyroid stimulating hormone. When thyroid stimulating hormone approaches to this thyroid follicle, it will cause release of your thyroid hormone, both T3 as well as T4. Okay, next, as we have discussed earlier, T4 is physiologically more amount of T4 has been synthesized as compared to T3, but T4 is very less active, or you can say it is negligibly active as compared to T4. Okay, so that means even if we have synthesized the thyroid hormone, it is of not much functional, because for normal functioning we require T T3, but T3 is synthesized in very less amount as compared to T4. So we have got a mechanism by which T4 is converted into T3. Okay, so whenever this thyroid hormone is been synthesized, after releasing into the blood, this T4 will be moving to certain organs such as your liver or any of your muscle, okay, or your adipose tissue. So in these areas, these are the areas where T4 is metabolized to form T3. Okay, T4 is been converted into T3 in these areas. Okay, so first of all we'll write the chemical structure and we'll get to know. So T4 is basically 3 5 3 prime 5 prime tetraiodothyronine. Okay, and these areas contain an enzyme which we need to make T3. T3 is 3 5 3 prime triiodothyronine. Okay, so we need to remove this 5 prime iodine. Okay, iodine present on the 5 prime. So similarly we have got the name of the enzyme, that is 5 prime deiodinase. 5 prime deiodinase. Okay, so 5 prime deiodinase is the enzyme which will remove this 5 prime iodine and it will lead to the synthesis of T3, or you can say T4 is converted into T3. This step is known as peripheral conversion. Peripheral conversion means in the periphery T4 is converted into T3. This is known as peripheral conversion, and this is how T4 is converted into T3. So this was regarding the synthesis and release and peripheral conversion of your thyroid hormone. Now how can we treat hyperthyroidism? Okay, so the first way for treating hyperthyroidism is by inhibiting this importer, by inhibiting this sodium iodide symporter. This is the first mechanism by which we can treat hyperthyroidism. Second way is by inhibiting this enzyme thyroid peroxidase. Okay, so thyroid peroxidase is basically involved in the oxidation, organification and coupling reactions, and when you are inhibiting this enzyme, basically you are inhibiting the synthesis of thyroid hormone. Okay, so by inhibiting this transporter we can inhibit the trapping of the iodine molecule. By inhibiting thyroid peroxidase enzyme, we can inhibit the synthesis of your thyroid hormone. Another way by which we can treat hypothyroidism is by inhibiting the release of the thyroid hormone into the blood. Okay, whatever thyroid hormone is synthesized in the colloid, we should restrict it to enter into the blood. So this is also a way by which we can treat hyperthyroidism. Next, another way is by inhibiting this peripheral conversion, by inhibiting this enzyme. Okay, when 5 prime deiodinase enzyme is been inhibited, there won't be any conversion of T4 to T3. Since T4 is very less active, so even if it is present, it is not of more problem. Okay, so by inhibiting peripheral conversion also we can treat hyperthyroidism. And last way, the fifth mechanism by which we can treat hyperthyroidism is by thyroid destroying drugs. Okay, for destroying the thyroid gland, by destroying thyroid gland. Okay, so we have got 5 ways by which we can treat hyperthyroidism. The first was by inhibiting the transportation of iodine, by inhibiting the iodine trapping. The second method is by inhibiting the enzyme thyroid peroxidase. Third method is by inhibiting the thyroid hormone to enter into the blood circulation. Fourth way is by inhibiting the peripheral conversion, and fifth way is by destroying the thyroid gland. So these are the 5 mechanisms by which we can treat your hyperthyroidism. So we'll check out each one by one. So we'll start with our first mechanism, that is sodium iodide symporter inhibitor. Sodium iodide symporter inhibitor. Drugs coming under this class are perchlorate, next we have got pertectinate, thiocyanate, and nitrates. Okay, so these agents basically they will inhibit the iodine trapping from your blood vessels, but it is said that these agents are very toxic because these agents may induce goiter, so they are also known as goitrogens. Goitrogens means there are chances of producing goiter from these agents. Okay, so these agents are not used clinically, but there are some food that contains these goitrogens, like thiocyanate is present in high amount in cabbage. So any person who will consume large amount of cabbage, he is supposed to get goiter. Okay, so this is regarding the sodium iodide inhibitors. These are the drugs, but these drugs are no more used for the treatment of hyperthyroidism because there are chances of inducing goiter from these agents. Okay, now our second mechanism was to inhibit the enzyme thyroid peroxidase. So, now the second class of drugs are the drugs that mainly act by inhibiting thyroid peroxidase enzyme. So we call them as thyroid peroxidase inhibitors. Thyroid peroxidase inhibitors. Now the drugs coming under this class are carbimazole, methimazole, and lastly propylthiouracil. It is also abbreviated as PTU. PTU, propylthiouracil. So basically these three drugs mainly act by inhibiting the enzyme thyroid peroxidase. So basically you can say these drugs are the drugs which are inhibiting the synthesis of your thyroid hormone. Okay. Now regarding this carbimazole, it is a kind of prodrug. And when this prodrug, this carbimazole undergoes metabolism, it becomes methimazole. So basically you can say the activity of both carbimazole and methimazole is one and the same. But there is somewhat difference in propylthiouracil. Okay. So you can you can remember the actions or activities of propylthiouracil from P. See, P for propylthiouracil, P for potency. It has got less potency, or you can say propylthiouracil are less potent. When you see about carbimazole and methimazole, these are more potent. Next, about plasma half-life, propylthiouracil have got low plasma half-life, whereas carbimazole and methimazole have got more plasma half-life. So in these two aspects, carbimazole and methimazole seems to be more superior than propylthiouracil. Now the advantage of propylthiouracil is it have got low placental transmission. That means it cannot easily cross the placenta, whereas carbimazole and methimazole, it have got more placental transmission. Okay, so you can say any pregnant lady who is suffering from hyperthyroidism, we can prefer propylthiouracil because it is a safer drug, since it does not cross the placenta and it will not affect the fetus, whereas carbimazole and methimazole, we should think before prescribing these two drugs for a pregnant lady, since these two drugs can easily cross the placental barrier. And one more action of propylthiouracil is it also inhibits peripheral conversion. Peripheral conversion is inhibited. Okay, if you remember, peripheral conversion means T4 converted to T3 is known as peripheral conversion, and propylthiouracil can also inhibit this peripheral conversion by inhibiting the enzyme 5' deiodinase. Okay, so propylthiouracil basically have got two mechanism of action for inhibiting hyperthyroidism. One is by inhibiting the enzyme thyroid peroxidase, and the second mechanism is by inhibiting the peripheral conversion, whereas carbimazole and methimazole does not have any role in the inhibition of peripheral conversion. So this is regarding the agents that inhibits thyroid peroxidase enzyme. Okay, now just assume there is one person, okay, and that person is suffering from hyperthyroidism, and because he is suffering from hyperthyroidism, you prescribe to that person to take carbimazole, and you prescribe 10 mg of carbimazole to be taken for 1 week. Okay, so that particular person who is suffering from hyperthyroidism, he will consume 10 mg of carbimazole for 1 week, and you expect that after 1 week the symptoms of hyperthyroidism should be reduced. But after 1 week there wasn't any reduction in the hyperthyroidism symptoms. So next you prescribe increasing dose, like 20 mg you prescribe for almost 1 week. Okay, and you expect that at least this week, in second week, the symptoms of hyperthyroidism should be reduced. But after 1 week the patient again comes with same symptoms without any relaxation of the hyperthyroidism symptoms. So again you increase the dose to 30 mg to be taken for 1 week. So after 1 week you will expect that at least now the symptoms of hyperthyroidism should be reduced, but you still fail because again the patient comes with same symptoms, with same problems, same complaints. So this time now you are giving 40 mg of carbimazole to be taken for 1 week, and after 1 week, you know what happened? The patient will come with severe hypothyroidism. You know why these things happens? Because this T3 and T4, this thyroid hormone, are being stored for nearly 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, we have got 2 to 3 weeks storage of this thyroid hormone, and in case of hyperthyroidism it may be almost for 4 weeks. Okay, so we have got storage of the thyroid hormone for almost 4 weeks. Even if there is no synthesis of thyroid hormone, but still we have got a storage of thyroid hormone for almost 4 weeks. Okay, so you can say these drugs, these thyroid peroxidase inhibitors, these drugs are very slow acting. Okay, so we cannot get an immediate response of these drugs. So that means we need to wait for at least 4 weeks before increasing the dose of the drugs. Okay, so these drugs are slow acting because these drugs basically they are inhibiting the synthesis, but whatever thyroid hormone are been previously synthesized is been stored for nearly 2 to 3 weeks normally, and in case of hyperthyroidism patient we have got nearly 4 weeks of storage of thyroid hormone. Okay, so this is regarding the second mechanism, that is thyroid peroxidase inhibitors. Next we'll see about our third mechanism by which we can treat hypothyroidism, and the third mechanism is by inhibiting the secretion. So these are the agents which mainly inhibit the secretion or the release of the thyroid hormone. So you can say these are the agents which are a kind of fast acting. Now the drugs coming under this class are iodine, iodides of sodium and potassium, next we have got organic iodide, and lastly Lugol's iodine. So these are the drugs coming under this class. Now you people might be thinking that these drugs are somewhat like iodine containing, like though iodine is a constituent of thyroid hormone, but it is a kind of fastest acting thyroid inhibitor. Okay, so what happens? See, these agents are commonly used pre-operatively, that is before a thyroid surgery. And the reason is, when we give these drugs pre-operatively, basically what they do, they will make the gland smaller. They will make the gland less vascular. Less vascular means there will be reduced blood supply to the thyroid gland, because of which the gland will become small, firm and less vascular, and thereby the release of the iodine you can say the release of the thyroid hormone is been inhibited. Okay, and you can say it is a condition known as thyroid constipation. See, what is the exact mechanism of action we still does not know, but these agents will inhibit the release of the thyroid hormone. See, whatever thyroid hormone is there present in your colloid, the T3 and T4, it will stay here only. So a condition known as thyroid constipation is produced because of these drugs, because it will not affect the synthesis of your thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone will be synthesized on regular basis, whatever was happening, but just its release is been inhibited. And how it inhibits means it will reduce the vascularity of the gland. Vascularity means it will reduce the blood supply to the gland, because of which the thyroid gland will become smaller, shrunken, and it will become firm, and there won't be, it will be unable to release the thyroid hormone. So you can say these agents are fast acting agent. Okay, these are faster acting agent in case of hyperthyroidism. So this is also a kind of mechanism by which we can treat hyperthyroidism. Now the next class of drug is the drugs that inhibits peripheral conversion. Fourth is peripheral conversion inhibitors. So the drugs coming under this class is propranolol, propyl thiouracil, that is your PTU, and lastly prednisolone. So mechanism of action is quite simple. T4 is converted into T3 with the enzyme 5' deiodinase, and these agents mainly act by inhibiting the enzyme 5' deiodinase, and therefore the conversion of T4 to T3 is inhibited. Very simple mechanism of action as such. Now coming to the last method for treatment of hyperthyroidism is thyroid gland destruction, or you can say removal of thyroid gland. See, this is the last option. If your hyperthyroidism is unable to treat or it is untreatable, then our last option is to perform a surgery and remove the thyroid gland. Okay, but there are some conditions, means there are some situations where this surgery will be quite risky, like if a person is very elderly, very old age person, or if the person is suffering from some kind of heart problem, some kind of heart issues. Under that, these circumstances, performing a thyroid surgery is very much risky. But we don't have any other option, because all the drugs have been failed, and now we have to remove the thyroid gland from your body. So we want another alternative to surgery. So another alternative for the thyroid gland destruction apart from surgery is to use radioactive iodine. Okay, so this is our radioactive iodine. So with the help of radioactive iodine, we can destroy the thyroid gland. Okay, so what we'll do, we will consume this radioactive iodine orally. After consuming orally, it will follow the same route as that of your normal iodine. Okay, after consuming the radioactive iodine, it will appear here in your blood circulation. Okay, and it is taken up by the same transporter, that is your sodium iodide importer, into your follicular cells, and then it moves via same mechanism in the colloid, and via same mechanism the thyroid hormone is being formed and it is stored here. But the hormone whatever is formed, it is formed by using iodine, which is not a normal iodine but a radioactive iodine. Okay, so after storage over here, what will happen? This, since you know radioactive iodine means it is a kind of radioactive substance which will start producing radiations, and whatever tissues come in its path, it will start destroying them. Now you will think that if it is so much dangerous, if these radioactive substances are so much dangerous, so there are chances that it may go to some other part of our body and it may destroy some other part instead of thyroid gland. But these radioactive isotopes are very much specific, because the specificity is because of this transporter, sodium iodide transporter, which you will find only and only in your follicular cells. So these transporter will collect all the radioactive isotope within itself. Okay, and these will be moving inside the colloid. Now the more importance of this radioactive iodine is this will produce radiation which is a kind of beta rays, and beta rays have got less penetrating. Okay, so it will not penetrate entirely. Suppose here is your radioactive isotope, it may penetrate till here only and it will damage the entire thyroid follicle. It may not penetrate so much. The penetration power of the beta rays will be limited, so it will be present at the center of the colloid. Okay, and colloid is present in the center as such, and from the colloid it will start producing rays and it will destroy the entire thyroid follicle, and ultimately the entire thyroid gland will be inhibited. So for removal of the thyroid gland, we have got another alternative, that is the use of the radioactive iodine. It is a kind of radioactive isotope which will be reproducing beta rays, and these beta rays have got not that much penetration power. Its penetration power is sufficient enough to destroy the entire thyroid gland. Okay, now the important thing regarding this radioactive iodine is these agents are contraindicated in pregnancy. Okay, and suppose we take an overdose of this radioactive iodine, then what will happen? See, we will compare it with an overdose of other anti-thyroid drug. Okay, suppose if we take an overdose of any other anti-thyroid drug such as your carbimazole or methimazole or propylthiouracil, in that cases, in overdose of these drugs, there are chances to produce hypothyroidism. And when hypothyroidism is produced, then how can we treat hypothyroidism? So we will simply stop taking those drugs, and then in the body automatically our thyroid hormone will be synthesized and the hypothyroidism will be treated. Okay, so overdose of any hyperthyroidism drug will be of not that much problem, but overdose of this radioactive isotope is very much problematic, because overdose of this radioactive isotope is that these are a kind of irreversible drugs. Okay, irreversible drug means once they have destroyed the thyroid gland will not synthesize again. Okay, and we require a lifelong thyroid therapy. So it is recommended that if you want to destroy the thyroid gland, better you destroy it after the age of 35 years. Okay, because after destroying the thyroid gland with the help of the radioactive isotope, you require a lifelong thyroid therapy. Okay, and moreover, you know the half-life of this radioactive isotope is, half-life of this radioactive iodine is about 8 days. Okay, so this is regarding the destruction of the thyroid gland by the radioactive iodine. So I hope you understood this entire video. Thank you.